so excited to be here with you today to talk about one of my most favorite topics, which is conscious relationships. Um, I hugely respect you and your perspective on this. And I'm just really happy that we get to have a chance to come together and chat about it. So I'm going to actually let you, if you are comfortable with it, just introduce yourself first and let everybody know who you are and what you do and whatever else you want to share.
Okay. And great to be doing this with you as well. You and I met at a teal workshop in Phoenix.
Yes, the Teal Swan workshop in Phoenix.
Yeah, and I resonated with you immediately.
No.
Yeah. So, and been keeping up with you on your Facebook too. So.
Me too. Likewise, the internet is a wonderful thing.
Yes, it is. So, my name is Bill White, and my specialty is communication and relationships. And like you, I'm interested in people having conscious relationships. I grew up in a family that did not have a conscious relationships, and it was not fun. And I didn't know. I was pretty much clueless about relationships. So I had a spiritual awakening. 1982, many years ago, and in that awakening, I saw a lot of things about life and about myself, and I was inspired to just take more action to tell the truth about how difficult things were going for me, and to start a path of learning and also working with others. So pretty much soon after that, I started working with others. I specialize in couples, but I love working with families, and also work with individuals, because it's all individual fundamentally.
Yeah.
And it's all of our challenges, almost all of them are directly related to our childhood beliefs, our traumas, our experiences there, and how we've decided to live life and protect ourselves. And until we're conscious of that, it kind of runs the show. So I specialize in that arena as well. I have a master's degree in mental health counseling, and really for 45 years, probably every week, every month of every year, I've been involved in some kind of workshop, training, therapy, practice, and then sometimes running a business. So
Oh, I just love that, Bill, and I'm just kind of over here giggling because it's really nice to just meet a kindred and just really admire your dedication to the work and fascination with the work, and engaging on so many different levels. And I think, sometimes somebody could have gotten a counseling degree like 45 years ago and then just kind of did their practice and not done any of those continuing education, capitalized on those opportunities and learned more and expanded more. And it feels to me like you're someone who's constantly doing that, constantly wanting to explore different angles and go deeper, and expand and explore. And I feel similarly myself. And so it's very cool to hear that. And I'm also sort of a nerd about this kind of thing. So I'm just excited to kind of geek out with you.
Yeah. And did you want to share yourself?
Yeah. For those who don't know me, my name is Julia Friedman. Julia Claire Friedman is my website, juliaclairefriedman.com. But I have a background actually in working with children. I do inner child work and trauma recovery for adults. And I mostly work with individuals, although I do sometimes work with couples. And I have a master's degree in human development. So developmental studies is kind of my focus. And I think, like you, Bill, I'm really fascinated by and interested in looking at the ways in which our childhood experiences and our childhood traumas, most specifically, inform our patterns in adulthood and our patterns of relating, and also how we can use relationship. We can either use it as a recreation of our childhood experiences, or we can use it as an opportunity to awaken, an opportunity to grow and heal, with other human beings, which I believe is what we were designed to do.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you live where?
I live in Oregon currently. I grew up in California,
Okay.
but currently I'm in Oregon, on the Oregon coast. Yeah.
I'm in Tucson, and I grew up in Kentucky.
Kentucky. Ah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Wow. So I love just the fact that we do have some kind of like diversity in our backgrounds in that regard. Just growing up in different places, in the country and in different, time periods, and being a woman versus being a man. There's different angles and different experiences that I think we might have that might be complementary and beneficial. So I was just wanting to share a little bit very briefly, and then have you share as well, like why I teach on relationships and why I talk about relationships so much. And I think, for me, it's just like, I think studying human development and studying, even if you just study like sociology or psychology or whatever, you kind of come back to this fundamental understanding that we are a connection-based species, and that we've really moved away from that, particularly in Western culture, I think to the detriment of many of us. And there's a huge epidemic, I would say, of isolation and loneliness, and also, an epidemic of really awful relationship patterns, and failed relationships, and I think more and more, I felt the pain of going through relationship hell kind of in my own right. And just have seen and witnessed so much pain that people feel around relationships, because it's not just the pain of the relationship being crappy or the relationship ending or what not working out or whatever it is, or fighting. It's also that it brings up all the other stuff. It brings up all that childhood pain, brings up our developmental trauma, our attachment wounding, all of that stuff. And so I really see this need to shift the awareness that we have around relationships, to shift the paradigm of how we relate to relationships, how we understand what a relationship's function is, and how to enter into one in a different way, in a conscious way, so that some of that pain can be actually not just avoided, but used as a gateway to healing and growth.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'm with you there. It's called being conscious when you're doing relationship, and not just going by what you feel and what's been taught to you about how to do relationships and what you think it's about. It's about really giving thought. I think there's two things that we need to give thought to. It's when we're angry and when we're in love.
Ooh,
That was good, wasn't it?
Yeah, I like that.
I like that too.
Yeah. Well, anger is such an important messenger. I think all our emotions are important messengers, for different reasons. But anger is one that I think is misunderstood and misinterpreted, if not completely like squelch, and, being in love or falling out of love as well. I think, it's such a teacher if we let it be a teacher, but it's very easy to go unconscious, and I think I was sharing with you just before the call that I think, a lot of us are sort of sold this lie, as a girl who grew up in the 80s, and in the Western world, it was like all the Disney princesses, and, you watch Cinderella being, and Ariel, and, you know, all of these movies end with being carried away on a white horse, or you just, they get married and then that's the end. Bye. They lived happily ever after.
Right.
You know, happily ever after. And, you know, there's this idea of the knight on the white horse and everything. And it's just not reality, you know, and so many industries as well are like, oh, you know, wear this makeup so that you can be attractive, so that you can get that special partner, you know, do this thing so that you can find that love that you need. And, you know, and it's like this never ending quest, but the ideas that we have about what being in love actually means and what a relationship actually means are, I think a lot of it is based in fantasy, you know, and I think that sets people up for a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And that's why we need to give thought to it, because otherwise we're just going to do what we're following scripts that we haven't even give a lot of thought to the scripts. We just follow these scripts that have come to us. So yeah, it causes a lot of pain. And I think the source of most ills in our world, in our society, are because we don't do relationships, love relationships well.
I
And
completely agree.
and we create children in those dysfunctional relationships that become your next person who has suicided or has killed somebody else or has succumbed to mental illness or homelessness. Um,
Right. Or your next corrupt politician, you know, or
exactly.
military leader who wants to bomb someone, right?
Yep.
It's like you can really take it that deep. I think what you're saying is really profound. It's very, very true. If you break it down, it is because we don't know how to relationship that our global society is in the state that it's in. And so, yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that point that you made. That's why it's like, it's not something frivolous to teach about relationships. It's not something that's just like, oh, that would be nice. It's like, it's literally something that fundamentally needs to change in order for our world to change.
Yeah, it's life and death,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
It truly is. So not only to avoid the crap, but to enjoy your life. You know, if you got
Yeah.
some conscious relationship going, you can enjoy that and love that and be empowered and inspire others.
Yes. Yes. 100%. I remember actually Teal Swan, who of course is like a mutual mentor and friend of ours. Um, she once said, I can't remember, I think it was in a blog she wrote a few years back now, but she said, if when someone asks you the question, like, how is your life going, or how are you doing, or are you happy? What they're really asking is, how are your relationships doing?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's really what it is, you know. And it's also obviously that extends to your relationship with yourself, your relationship to your body, your relationship to your home, your relationship to the planet Earth, your relationship to your career. So you could kind of take it that far as well. But I think she teaches a lot on just how to move towards a more interdependent type of an understanding and functionality. I certainly share those views as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. We could just plug in some
Yeah.
of her stuff and.
I mean, I always like to mention her too, to sort of the credit where credit is due for myself, because she has informed so much of my work and made such a huge impact on me. And I think part of that is because majority of spiritual teachers are out there sort of telling people that, like, oh, you just meditate and find yourself. You know, my parents, it's so funny when you said you had your awakening in 82. It's like my parents, they were married in an ashram in 1982 in India, you know, and so they started following this guru in the late 70s. And so I was raised in this sort of pseudo spiritual household. It was really kind of more of an Eastern cult. There were a lot of like dark stuff going on that I wasn't aware of when I was a child that I'm aware of now. But you know, I think like there's this idea of just like, you know, you meditate and you find what it is you need inside of you, and this notion of awakening through relationships, or this notion of that even being important, at least in some of those traditions, I think is like, it's just not what's commonly accepted.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And in contrast, Teal is out there really teaching the opposite, and also doing so from sort of a spiritual perspective, that it's healthy and important to be interdependent, and that's actually our progression as a species.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to, before I just like go off on 18 different tangents as I'm known
Right.
to do, I want to ground this in, and you mentioned conscious. Conscious was a huge word that popped out for me as you were speaking a moment ago. And I don't know if we want to like define what a conscious relationship is. Do you want to like define that briefly for people? Like, what's the difference between a conscious relationship versus an unconscious relationship?
Well, in this conversation we're having, where the idea is to present to people what the key requirements are for a healthy relationship, yes, or conscious relationship, and I'm thinking partly we'll get that covered in answering that question.
Perfect. Yes, no, you're absolutely right, because that's gonna dig into what exactly it looks like to have a relationship. Yeah. So then yeah, what are some of the key requirements as you see it, Bill, for you to have a conscious relationship or healthy conscious relationship?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's really, for me, 3 key pieces. A lot of things will come on their own if you put these 3 pieces in. There's a 4th one there as well, which is mutual sexual attraction. For a lot of people, it's like, well, yeah, of course. That's why you are in a love relationship. But I made a mistake or an error in judgment in a marriage many years ago, that we just had everything going, all kinds of chemistry, communication, and spiritual idea chemistry, or humor chemistry. We just loved being with each other, but I never had a sexual attraction towards her. I didn't even realize it, because she's attractive and charming, and we having a great time together when we did sex together, but it just wasn't that passion. And it took us years to figure that out. It's like, wait a minute, there's no sexual attraction here. Oh shit, it was a rough lesson. So I had that one in, because there's a lot of people who actually will get more than you would think, who would get into a relationship when there's not a mutual attraction. Somebody really loves you. It's like, oh, okay, then.
I've done it in the past when you're a woman with low self-esteem, or just anyone, I guess, with low self-esteem, and someone is really paying you attention and treating you like a queen. It was kind of like, well, they want me, so that's what I like about them.
Right.
But it wasn't, wasn't so much reciprocated.
Yeah. So,
and some people will sort of tell you that you can build that up over time. And I think a lot of people convince themselves of that. And I do think that sexual attraction sort of waxes and wanes, and it depends how connected you are, on other levels, emotionally and intimately, and that sort of thing. But if there's not like a baseline kind of, fundamental physical chemistry that's in the beginning, it's very unlikely that I was going to develop an attraction to some of the men that I dated, that I just was like, don't even really like kissing you, but like, you're nice and you like me. So anyway.
Yeah, well, and that's another big one. And with Noelle, my former wife, I like kissing, and I found I wasn't like that interested in kissing her. And I'm like, what's this about? Sex felt good, like a massage can feel good. You don't have to be attracted to somebody to have a good massage, but But that's a key indicator. Do you like kissing? I think,
Yeah. Yeah. Like if you have a first date and you kiss and you sort of get those like first kiss tingles, like that you want some of those little tingles happening at some point, right?
yeah, you do. And I just say, yeah, if the passion's not quite there yet, then give it some time, but don't commit to a relationship without the passion being there.
Yeah.
Would be my recommendation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate that point. I think some people might say that that's a given, but I totally agree with you that it's actually not always. So, yeah. So what are the other three then?
Three. Yep. Yep. Um, and most of these, I actually thought about writing a book called The Relationship Party Pooper, because these aren't the things that people really want to do, but this to me is crucial for conscious relationships. And the little I know about you, I think that you are pretty much aligned with this too, but I'll be curious to see how so. But the first one, and then probably the most important, is that you have a commitment to address and resolve all significant emotional upsets and conflicts, emotional distancing.
Yes.
And you have to learn how to do that. And by golly, almost nobody knows how to do that. Even therapists, it's almost missing in our culture of being human, the having adequate skills for communication when there's difficult emotions.
Absolutely. Yes, I completely agree with that. I think across the board that's true, but I think, especially in intimate relationships, love relationships, where I think that's really the most charge that we're going to feel emotionally in relationship with other. Yeah, how to navigate through those conflicts. There's just a lack of general awareness of that, of how to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if you don't address those things that are bugging you, they will eat up the relationship.
100%.
Yep, 100%. No question. And most people go with the feeling of, oh, we're in love. We don't need to talk about that stuff. We don't even have any conflicts. It's like I'm just, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, if in time, if you had the thought that you wanted to come see me at that point, you will need to come see me as a professional to help you untangle yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think too, like there's a key piece to that point that you're talking about being proactive in your communication of these things and being really on top of it, not waiting until things explode in a giant conflict necessarily, to address these little things that you might have in the back of your mind or little things that you might be sweeping under the rug before they become really big things.
Right. Yep. Yep. So again, that's about being conscious, putting a plan in place on how to do this,
Yes.
So the second commitment, requirement, they're both kind of the same, something you're committed to, a requirement for a healthy relationship, is something we think we're doing and committed to, but we're not as much as we think. And that's having a commitment to be kind and respectful in your interactions with one another at all times, no matter how you feel. Because there will become times when you get triggered into something that's upsetting you, and you will feel like you have complete permission to be an ass with somebody, to get in somebody's face, to scream in their face, to do something, do anything else, but that's not respectful and kind. And what that does is it creates a sense of unsafety.
Yes. Yeah.
In the relationship.
Yeah.
And it triggers memories when you were a child and people screamed at you, or they screamed at each other, or they betrayed you, or they tricked you, or they abandoned you. And man, when those feelings come out, then you're like, you're on fire.
World War III.
Yeah, and you're ready to give up your commitment to unkindness.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it can just, I think it can just erupt all kinds of things, you know, it can really kind of open these floodgates, you know, kind of explode a lot of stuff if that's not like a baseline, you know. And I actually really agree with you on this one, Bill. And I wanted to say that you know, I think at least in the circles that I sort of run in, and maybe in my generation as well, it's not as much considered to be a valuable commitment. That second one that you're describing. Because there's also this commitment to authenticity and commitment to myself and commitment to my truth and commitment to being rooted in what's real for me emotionally and expressing that emotionally. But what I really try to communicate to people is that there's a way that you can do those things, not abandon yourself, you know, be true to yourself, even find really healthy outlets for whatever it is you're feeling, even if it's rage, without jeopardizing the sacredness of that relationship by breaking that baseline agreement. That's one thing I think that my partner Antoine and I have done really, really well. That's the first time it's really been like this, you know, versus my past relationships where it's like we just have a baseline of how we talk to each other and treat each other. And it doesn't matter how upset someone is. And it's because we care enough about sort of the third entity of the relationship, in addition to caring about one another, that even if in that moment it's like, I feel like I don't give a shit about you, I'm still not going to fly off the handle because I care about this relationship that we're preserving. I care about the element of safety here. You know, I'm not willing to set that on fire just because I feel a way.
Great. Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, and you can even say, I'm feeling so upset at you right now. I want to choke you. I want to poke your eyes out, you know, but not, you know, but not in an attacking way. It's more
not
of
throwing that aggressive energy on them in a way that
yeah,
feels, you know, scary and, you know, and
yeah.
aggressive. And
It's
you
just
can,
this is what I'm feeling and
exactly,
experiencing right now. I'm
yeah.
reporting that I want to choke you right now.
I am so angry. And it's like, I'm a big believer too, that if you have somatic stuff that's coming up in your body and you need to go release it, you know, you can by all means step away. And, you know, when it's appropriate, you know, and when it's within sort of like, yeah, what's okay for both of your boundaries in the situation, like you can express that, you can feel that, you can for yourself, you can process it, you can see where the wounding is, that where it's hitting for you, where it's mirroring for you from your childhood. But bringing that to a discussion with your partner, that's just not the appropriate context. You know what I mean? For that is my feeling.
Yep. So one key reason for the commitment to kindness and respect is that you will want to be unkind and disrespectful at certain points. And if you're committed to being kind and respectful, then you're like, okay, I want to choke you right now, but I'm committed to kindness and respect. So what do I do now? So there's options. You know, if you commit to kindness and respect, then you look for options. Okay, one option is I need to just walk away, go outside, chop some wood, scream in my car. And after I've screamed in my car, then I'm going to use the skills that I have to self-process myself. If I don't have somebody I can call, that I self-process myself and find out what got triggered, how's it related to my childhood, what's my negative assessment of this situation and that person in front of me, and how's that related to childhood, where's my pain, my emotional pain, not my anger, where anger was a secondary emotion, grief and fear were the primary emotions you felt. And so how can I be vulnerable and get in touch with my fear? I'm afraid you leave me. I'm afraid you're gonna think badly of me. I was hurt because you were critical of me, and I felt sadness. You know, how can I get there and talk and communicate those instead of the anger?
Yes, because that's the defensiveness, which is a valid response, you know, obviously, and it's a defense, but it's a push away, instead of a pulling close, you know. And what you're talking about is getting to the more vulnerable emotions. You know, I work with some people, you know, like a lot of women actually that I work with, have a tough time getting in touch with their anger. Some of them don't,
Yep.
but you know, it depends on the person, kind of where the comfort zone is. So
Yep.
sometimes some work to be done to, you know, getting into anger,
Right.
versus staying in, you know, I'm just sad or I'm wounded or whatever. And sometimes that's the empowerment that we need to discover, oh, here's where my boundaries are, you know. But a lot of times as well, I think, like, if we're speaking in general terms, anger, you know, no matter what, basically it's an emotion that pushes away instead of pulls close. And it's not those vulnerable. I mean, if you're someone who habitually goes into anger, you know, with a partner, and that's very, very easy to do, especially like I was saying in one-to-one love relationships, it feels like that's where the charge is at. It's going to bring out those wounds, that hurt, the shame, you know. And so the antidote to that is, what's the vulnerable emotion underneath? Where am I feeling ashamed? I'm unworthy. I'm unlovable. What am I afraid of? I'm going to lose you. You know, I'm going to lose myself. You know, whatever is there, we want to sit with it long enough to be able to get there, and then we can come back and communicate about those things. Or we can, you know, go through that process of uncovering and communicating with a partner. But the point is that we get to that place where we're pulling each other in instead of pushing each other away.
Yep. Exactly. And I'll put an exclamation point on what you said about a lot of times women, especially, females have not been allowed to be angry
Yeah.
as a child. Uh, Men, boys, often it's okay to be angry, but you can't cry.
And be
But
vulnerable.
women can't, you know, you can't be angry. So they cry sometimes when they're angry. And
Yes, I've been give that myself.
so yeah, women, not just women, but a lot of times women need some rehabilitation to get in touch with their anger and not jump right into the vulnerable emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. And I think too, because it's like anger is the messenger, like we were saying before, that I feel like it's such a powerful messenger, but it tells us where our boundaries are. It tells us what our personal truth is, what our needs are, what, you know, because there's something happening here that I feel needs to change in some kind of a way. And so it's really important to get in touch with that, so that you know what you need, you know, so that you know what those things are that you're requiring that aren't happening, right? And so that
Sure.
you communicate those.
Yep. Yep. I agree. A lot of tangents we can go on.
Yes, there's so many, and
I
I'm
mean,
really good at that. So
yeah,
maybe
and
point
but
number 3.
yeah, but they're very good topics. I mean, I could probably talk. We could have a all day
I know.
video on this. There's so much, uh, and maybe we will someday. But um, so yeah, so commitment to address conflict and feelings and learn how. Then the commitment to being kind and respectful no matter what. Um, then the third one is a and it's requirement. To me, it's a requirement. If I'm going to be in a relationship, all these three are required. And if my potential partner is not interested in these, then I just won't go into that relationship.
Yeah.
And the third one is that it answers the question, what do you do when you don't have the tools and when you get upset and you don't know how to be kind and respectful, and what do you do? And most people are like, I don't know what we'll do, you know, and maybe they'll go talk to their friends or read a book, but they'll usually go to places that don't have the resources that they need. And in my mind, we need skilled third parties to help us walk through the blind spots, the places where we're not quite aware and conscious. Um, and if you're not willing, if a person's not willing to go to a skilled third party, you're stuck.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I hear that so often too, Bill, from, I think most people, first of all, go to therapy as sort of like a last ditch effort.
Right?
And by that point, you know, for a lot of people, it's like, oh, there's already been such a divide and so much damage done. But I hear, especially from women a lot, because I work with a, you know, pretty even mix actually, but women tend to be the ones that come to me most with all the relationship stuff. And, you know, I work with a lot of women who, you know, they try to get their partners into counseling and they'll just flat out say no.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think this is a socialization thing. Same thing as why women are the ones that tend to come to me with problems about the relationships, because it's a socialization type of a factor, that they're sort of programmed to be more concerned than men are with these types of things and to talk about their feelings about it, you know. And I don't think it's a secret that, you know, a lot of people think that therapy or seeking outside help is a sign of some kind of a defectiveness or weakness, you know, and that's also dependent upon your culture and just kind of what you feel and believe about this. But the other thing I wanted to mention too is that, like, because so Antoine and I aren't seeing a therapist. We've never seen a therapist together, and we do not have significant conflict.
Okay.
We are able to work through conflict that arises really really pretty swiftly and find resolution. We're both really committed to repair, and we're really committed to the commitment, or to the kindness that you were speaking of. But I actually feel like, you know, proactively, I wonder if like I've been thinking about, is it a good idea just to go and see someone and get a third kind of pair of eyes about what's going on? Are there issues there that, you know, we might want to unpack proactively, or it's kind of like, do you wait to the point where it's like, we probably need a third party intervention kind of a thing?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good that you're asking the question, even, you know, and
Right.
looking at that. You're probably in the upper 999% percentile of conscious people.
Oh, bless you, Bill. Thank you. Go, thanks you.
Well, I mean, 999 out of 1,000, well, it's more like 9,000 out of 10,000, are not doing the work you're doing. They haven't learned how to navigate conflicts and difficult feelings. They haven't learned to navigate their childhood influences. They haven't learned to talk to a partner about them. You have done that. You've been in the middle of that. I presume Antoine has too, and if not, he's very open to it. So as long as you're addressing and clearing up the things that are getting in the way, then there's not a need, and you're doing it kindly and respectfully, there's not a need for a third party. But you can also set up to have a third party available in case something does.
I like that. Yeah.
Which also creates safety in the relationship. It's like, then it's not dependent on you two's ability to walk through it, that you're like, okay, we got this person or two people as all options for us if we get into tangled up in blind spots and we're like just lost in the moment and we don't know what to do, and we're feeling miserable. It's like, well, make it easy on yourself. Have somebody that you could contact right away. And if you know you have that, you're going to feel safer.
Yes. And I just love that, because it's something that you can agree upon before there's, you know, significant distress and, you know, and rupture in the relationship, that both parties can agree on, and it's just set. And so you don't have to work through that when you're, people are triggered and, one person takes on the responsibility and is like, well, I found this, or, and then the other one says, I am not doing that. It's like, it was already an agreement. So I just really, really like that. I think that, it would probably behoove any couple just to set up like a backup plan if something happens, to have someone, and have that agreement in place. I really like that a lot.
Yep. And you're right. When you're in the middle of being lost, trying to find somebody is not a good time to be doing that, or even to see if you are in agreement with your partner.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
yeah, I mean, like for you guys, it might be a good idea to find somebody, or even two people, different people, because somebody may not be available when you need them, and go ahead and set up, have an initial session with them so that you get to know each other, they get to know you, and so if there's something that comes up, then you can step right in to addressing things without necessarily needing to, you can do it in an emergency situation rather than having to gather information and get to know each other during an emergency.
Yes. I have definitely actually done that in the past, where it's like we're on a sinking ship and everything's burning, and everything's on fire, and, we kind of like scrambling to find solution and going in, and, kind of by that point, there's been such significant breakdown. I think there were other requirements not being met in that relationship.
Sure.
So to speak. So, because that's not to say that, therapy won't work if your relationship is on kind of it feeling like what's its last leg, because I have seen people come back from, significant period of stress in their relationship by seeking counsel like that. But just in my experience, it was sort of, it would have been nicer to have it sooner, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if there's something else I wanted to add to that, and not just any third party is a skilled third party. Even a professional is not necessarily skilled. The skill quality of professionals kind of scares me, and it worries me that people who generally want to get support go to somebody, try to find somebody, and they don't find somebody who's actually even a good listener, much less they don't even have this, the professional doesn't even have the skills, especially for couples work.
Oh yeah. I've heard horror stories. I'm sure you have as well. So
Oh yeah.
I feel like referrals are a really good way to go. Referrals and come from people who you maybe know and trust, who have had their own experiences with certain professionals.
Yep. And on my website, I've got an entire page that's designed to how to find a good professional. Thehealthycouple.com is my website.
Oh, okay. Thehealthycouple.com. Got it.
Yep. And I've also got an article in the article section on the 3 requirements we're discussing right now.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's cool. Very cool.
How convenient.
Yeah. So cute.
So yeah, okay. I know there's something else that I want to say that's not there yet, but so these to me, I like to make things simple as much as possible. Relationships are complex.
Yeah.
Forget it if you think that they're not. Forget it,
Right.
And they are complex, and I try to make it simple. So these 3 requirements, 3 commitments, give you a focus to assess how you're doing with your relationship.
Yes.
And if any of those are out, then okay, that what's need to be put in right now.
Yeah.
And everything else most everything else will take care of itself if you got these 3 put in place.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those are really solid, Bill. I think those are really solid requirements.
Now, how did you, to interrupt that thought you were thinking,
Yeah, that's okay.
how
I
did,
lost it anyway, so go
yeah,
ahead.
how did you and Antoine establish agreements, whether it was conscious or unconscious? How did you
Right.
establish, beginning in the, as you were developing or beginning the relationship, how did you establish that, yeah, we're going to address issues and not let them grow and get under our feet and kill us off, and we're
Mm.
going to be kind and respectful? Um, did you all talk about that? Did you bring it to
We
the
did,
table?
actually, yeah. I mean, by the time that I had met Antoine, I had already had so many crappy experiences, and I was already a really conscious person, who had done a lot of work and a lot of reading on things and etc. And even though Antoine hadn't, um, received the type of therapy I had, or, read the type of books I had or whatever, he had had his own catalog of relationship experiences. We were both, we were 30 when we met, and I'm about to be 33, so we've been together almost 3 years.
Wow,
Um,
you're so young. I mean, I love seeing younger people doing this,
oh, yeah.
conscious
Well,
relationships.
I want to give younger people too this kind of permission slip to require conscious, conscious relationships, and be, an example of someone who has been able to make that work and not settle for, whatever your run of the mill unconscious, default programming in relationships. And so I appreciate you saying that. I don't
Yeah,
always feel so young, but I know that I am.
well, I know you don't, but I mean, it's maybe somebody like me who's older. I'm 63, and for maybe somebody your age might not listen to me, you know, but now that you're speaking the same things I'm speaking.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Well, and likewise, it's like sometimes it's like somebody, that's a little bit older may not want to listen to me, and someone who's a man may not want to listen to me. And also, I love to include Antoine sometimes on he wasn't available today, to do it today, but I love to include him sometimes on, just like live streams that I do about this, or, include his perspective. Also because, like he's African American, and he kind of comes from a different cultural background. And there's a lot of different ideas about relationships across gender, across culture, across race, class, etc. It's there are religion, there's so many variances. And so I think as many voices as we can get to talk about conscious relationships and share success stories as well is like really great and really important.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to answer your question, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, to get back to, you were saying you've been
Okay.
together for 3 years, and how did you introduce these ideas to each other?
Yeah, well, we had both been so just like we were both really like relationship people. Like since we were in high school, just like wanted that relationship. And I think there's something to be said. There's obviously something to be said for taking time by yourself as well, but there's something to be said for having experience after experience, of failed relationships,
Yeah.
and discovering what it is that works and what doesn't work, and what the requirements are for you, and what it looks like for you. And we actually, even though we were young, we were both, I think, at a place where we were just really ready for that kind of conscious relationship. And so I met him on OkCupid, believe it or not. And I wrote in my profile, I was just kind of like at this like, I don't give bleep phase, where it was like, I'm just going to put it all out there. And I put a lot out there about what, who I am and what I do for a living, and like, you got to be okay with emotions, and and I loved his profile, and he was talking about certain things that felt similar, about authenticity, about openness, connection, communication, things that I didn't see a lot of other people, a lot of other, younger folks on like Tinder, for example, or OkCupid or any, stuff like that. It's a lot of just like, well, I like sports and
Going
whatever.
to the movies and
Yeah,
yeah.
it's just like it's not anything of substance. And so we established a connection first on the telephone before we had our physical connection. And we actually we did a lot of talking. And he is someone who is actually really good at verbal processing and communication. He's like a Gemini rising, and he just has this, he's very, very verbal. And I really appreciated that about him from the beginning. Not all men are like that, obviously. Not all people are like that. But I've found that it's especially hard for me to find that in my connections with men. I think, again, because of the ways in which many people are socialized. But we had these discussions about, what does it look like for you? Like, what is it? And we were just really on the same page. Like, we want to be upfront about things as they come up. We want to be authentic. I really coach people on establishing like a sense of their values as well, and like what their needs are, what their values are, so that you can see, is that even aligned with the other party? Because sometimes people don't value things like openness, authenticity, they don't value those things as much as maybe other things. And so since we both had these values that were really compatible, and we had a similar vision, and then we just practiced, and we started small, right? Like, and I was sort of testing the waters too, like, what you said just then, I noticed that it really, I felt hurt, and just sort of seeing like, how does he respond if I'm bringing something up that's like not just, everything is great, we're going to the movies, like, we've only been dating 2 months. Like, I would bring stuff like that up, and every single time he really rose to the occasion, and he's really never let me down since in that regard. He's really shown that he's willing to have those tough conversations, and also willing to really look at himself. And that would be the only requirement, I think, that I would add to your list for myself. And this might be, you might feel like it's already sort of implicit in the list, but is a self-awareness, being conscious of your own patterns, your own emotions, like what you're bringing to the table, what your triggers are, like, and being able to take some ownership and some responsibility for that. And also really wanting to grow, wanting to expand, wanting to learn, wanting to heal, because that was one thing. I mean, that's one thing that I think with both me and Antoine as well, is that it's like, we value on an individual level our expansion and growth and healing. And so I think other times when, say I'm pointing out something that's particularly painful, that might cause a reaction for him, it's like he's really able to sort of hop out of his limited perspective of just being triggered in the moment, and sort of question, is there something here for me? Like, is this hitting on something for me? Why is this affecting me the way that it is? Is this something I need to look at for my own growth? And I think that's just really, really, really important as well.
Yeah, it's observing yourself rather than just being immersed in yourself. It's like,
Exactly.
I'm noticing that I'm reacting like a 4-year-old right now,
Yeah. And so it's like, it's self-awareness versus just reactivity, which I think for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's like, it takes a while actually to cultivate that, because I think relationships are so much of a mirror that often we just don't even get triggered in the ways that we do when we finally start to get into relationships that are really serious like that. And then it's like, whoa, like, holy crap, and the tendency is just to react, because those parts of us come out, and they've maybe never been, those buttons haven't been pushed like that since they were really installed, which was, of course, like by our families and everything, back in the day. And when those buttons get pushed, it's like real easy to just react. And so I think for me, like, it unfortunately took a lot of experiences of playing out that reactivity and really seeing where that got me, to just kind of really understand that I have to take a half step back from that, instead of just going with it.
Right. And I think what you're expressing is what I would consider subsets to the first requirement of, learning and how to communicate, and being committed to addressing issues and conflicts that come up and feelings. Um, the subset is certain skills you've already developed or you're going to be developing, like self-awareness and the ability to step back. If you're just if you're committed to addressing the issues that come up, then yeah, you may not know how, but you'll start to learn these subset things. But yeah, that's a good point. That's some good subsets there.
Yeah, subset. I mean, I know, like, you're actually quite similar to Antoine in this way. Like, I love the way you can sort of synthesize things and bring it down to, like, what's the baseline, what's the bottom line, you know? And then I'm the one that likes to go off on all these different angles, which is great to do as well and to explore. But I like that it can sort of all fit under umbrellas sometimes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. How about you? Like, how did you learn about these requirements for yourself? And like, did you make mistakes in your past that really led you to, I mean, I'm assuming you did, that really led to understanding these requirements?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I started fairly young with this too. I mean, I started going to therapy right out of high school, and which was not something that happened much.
Yeah.
In the 70s, early 70s. Um, so most of it wasn't very good therapy. Um,
Sure.
so, um, but I just noticed in my relationships that, you know, we devolve into arguing and uh, emotional distancing and not feeling good with each other. And the relationship would just, you know, peter out. We decided to just stop, you know. So, and it's been so long ago since I really started to come up with some of these ideas. Because when I married Noelle, the one I mentioned earlier, that was almost 25 years ago. And we were putting into place communication and putting things on the table and addressing childhood. I was kind of young at it. I wasn't very skilled at it. So we were together for 14 years, and we worked with trial and error how to communicate, how to relate about things, and we made a lot of, you know, not too pleasant mistakes, and you know, and it was really through that relationship where we knew we had such a adoration for each other as people that when we would get out of sync, we would work to try to get it back in. And just from doing that, I came up with, these ideas, you know, that just like, oh, well, let's make it a priority to address things when they come up, you know, and not put it aside. I noticed when we're vulnerable, we resolve our upset almost immediately. Well, let's just keep doing vulnerable. How do we do that? You know, how do we do vulnerable instead of protection and reactionary?
Right. Yeah. So you got to be the guinea pig, so the rest of us didn't have to, basically. So we can just listen to you.
Yep.
Although if you're anything like me, you have to try things out on your own so you can really get that something doesn't work, you know?
Sure. Yep. I am that way. It's not just hearing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, if you're on like YouTube or wherever and you're watching a video about conscious relationships, you've probably already experienced a lot of what doesn't work, you know, and you're probably actively looking for something different, you know.
Yep.
So how about so after Noel, when you have gotten into relationships, do you communicate these requirements up front and kind of get people to sign off on that?
Um, I'm kind of looking back at some of the earlier times after I was newly divorced. These patterns that we bring with us, they don't just disappear. They take some fine tuning,
Not.
you know, and one of my patterns is to give up on what I want and just follow the lead of the other person. And,
Mm.
so I got into some situations where I, was not clear from the beginning, you know, about these types of things. And, some more learning lessons. But they weren't long relationships because I knew what I wanted, and if it wasn't going to be happening, we wouldn't do it. But so, so I'm just thinking. So, and really, in all honesty, I've not been in any significant relationships since then. For numerous reasons, some one is I don't think that many people want a conscious relationship.
I mean, I wish that I could say that, everyone out there that I've met does, but I do believe that, although, I obviously believe that it's possible to find someone who does, because I have, and, I
Yep.
know that it is. I do believe and know really that it's a minority of people who are really interested in doing the type of deep work in a relationship that, that you or I are committed to.
Yep. Yep. So, and then there's women who've been interested in me. I've not been interested in them, and vice versa. I'm interested in them, they're not interested in me.
Sure.
And underneath all of that, and we could do another, conversation on that. But underneath all of that is, I've discovered also a lot of fear that I have about relationship that was based in what relationship meant for me as a child.
Yes.
It meant, mom and dad arguing, being angry with each other. It meant my relationship with mom, with dad was, I don't get to express myself. They can, beat me or yell at me or criticize me if they want to.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel safe in relationship.
Yeah.
Relationship was, my subconscious, when, consciously it's like, yeah, I want a relationship. And my subconscious is going, no, 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 no.
I totally get that. I'm really grateful that you were vulnerable enough to share that just now, Bill. And I think that's like hugely true for a lot of people, even though we say we want the relationship.
Yeah.
Another sort of nugget that Teal Swan gave me, I remember she had everybody, I can't remember where it was some event or another, or maybe it was, I can't remember. But she said, she had everybody close their eyes and focus on the word relationship, like just the word, and see what came up in our bodies, like what kinds of associations we have just with that word. And I think it was in an online workshop actually. And that was such a huge eye opener for me, because what came up was a lot of what you were describing. It was unsafe. It was, being kicked around, being a punching bag. Like it was not having
no voice. Yep.
It was being hurt. It was giving myself away. It was being, in some kind of contract that I didn't agree to. It was like, I don't get to have my needs met. All of those things. And that is why,
Bingo.
that's why I think if you're not doing your own work on your own developmental trauma, because we have all been wounded in relationship. That's just a fact for all of us. Some of us in all of us in different ways, some of us kind of to a greater extent than maybe others, or just in different ways than others. But until we can really get present to that and unpack some of that, and also kind of just redefine, not just on a conscious mental level, but on a subconscious level as well, what type of a relation, like what a relationship could mean. and what that could look like for us and what that might feel like, you know, then we won't be able to move into that. And I think for me, a huge turning point was changing actually the way that my friendships felt, other relationships in my life, you know, not just a love relationship, but, you know, there was a period of time where I was single, and that was actually really hard for me to be single. Like, I'm one of those girls that actually, like, I feel safer in a relationship, and because of my trauma, it's always been, you know, gotta have the guy. So it was really excruciating for me to be without the relationship. But what I ended up doing was working on having a new experience of relationship in my conscious friendships.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to develop like a different paradigm of what it could be like to be in a relationship, you know, that I could be received, that I could be loved just as I was, that I didn't have to give myself away, that I could have boundaries, you know, that I could have myself and not just give myself away to the other person. And I think that really set me up for being ready to attract the partner that, you know, that I wanted and needed into my life for a love relationship that felt good, you know, that didn't just play out those old patterns.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that I did before I met Antoine is, you know, aside from like working on my childhood trauma and relational trauma, attachment trauma, stuff like that, is I did get really clear about what my values were, like just on a personal level, what my needs were in relationships, and then also what the requirements were. So I do think those are sort of different. Like, there's like requirements where it's like, if you don't have these things, it's like a deal breaker. Deal breakers can actually be in its own separate category, in my opinion, because you can have some of the other requirements, but if you have a deal, I mean, if you're someone, for example, who like wants kids, that's like
Yeah,
a big one.
sure.
Like, you know, if they don't, then that's a deal breaker, right? Or for some people, it's like they cannot smoke. Like, my father died of lung cancer. I can't be with someone who smokes. That's a deal breaker. So I actually wrote down like my needs, my wants, and the deal breakers. And I did sort of like tick those boxes as well when I started dating Antoine. I did date a few people who didn't meet those requirements. I think that for a lot of us, you know, we really, because we seek so much, you know, we want relationships so badly, and also because new love feels really good. And especially if you have like a love addiction pattern, or like an anxious attachment type of pattern where it's like, I just need this to be the thing. You don't want to necessarily look at those things, you know, and you want to kind of paint all the red flags green, so to speak, so that you can just keep going. And then, you know, and then the other thing too is like, if you're far enough along in a relationship, you know, you really don't want to, you've already got that attachment to them. And so, you know, you better kind of get clear. You're not going to like necessarily always know, because you discover every day you're learning more about yourself, and every day you're in relationship, you're learning more about what you need in relationship, right? So it's not like by any means, I'm not one of those people that's going to tell you, oh, you need to like spend 2 years in a monastery and like figure out who you are before you have a relationship and just be so clear. But you want to like have some idea, right? Like for yourself, so that you can assess compatibility early on, because it's a lot more difficult to accurately assess compatibility when you're already in a phase where you're really, really attached to the person and you've had those bonding experiences and everything.
Sure.
So my question to you was going to be about compatibility, because I feel like it's an incredibly important element that's actually not talked about enough, and not understood, or if it is, it's not understood maybe enough. And it's like, my question is, how do you assess compatibility early on? Like, how do you encourage people to do that?
Good question. And yeah, I think it's important, like you said, to put a list of what you want in a partner, and also what's the requirements.
Sure.
And I separate it into preferences and requirements.
Oh, okay.
So
I like that.
like I have a preference that somebody makes a certain amount of money in their life, but it's not a requirement. You know, I wouldn't turn away somebody who has all the requirements just because they don't have certain preferences. You know, So, I mean, I've put together a document that it's like a list of all kinds of questions you ask yourself related to children and related to religion and all of that. Something like that can be good to go through, but I guess I keep defaulting back to those three commitments, three requirements of communication about difficult issues, kindness, and using a third party. That if you're doing those, you're going to be discovering the compatibility or the incompatibility.
Yes. That is often the terrifying thing, I think, about having a conscious relationship and bringing those issues to the table. I know Antoine said something in one of the workshops that we did a while back that really blew me away, and a lot of the participants as well really loved it. He said, in order to keep a relationship, you have to be willing to say things that might cause you to lose the relationship, you know? And that's why it's so terrifying. It's like, well, if I tell you this about me and it turns out that you don't want that thing, or that you can't give me that thing, or that whatever, that might mean back to the drawing board, or that might mean, you know, and I think that's the scary thing about that. But I also think that, you know, there's ways in which you can transition someone out of a primary love relationship role in your life and into maybe a friendship. You can do that. It doesn't have to be overnight, you know. But we do have to get really honest and really real, because the fact is, as I'm sure you know, and as I'm sure you've experienced it, it will come out eventually. The incompatibilities will come out eventually. So I would much rather get those out of the way and encourage people to get those, you know, to really get to know each other on those deep levels, and the ways in which you are compatible or incompatible earlier on, especially before you like have kids, things like that, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Or get married, you know.
Or get married.
Yeah, it's better to find out now, you know, and yeah, it's scary. Um, but do you want to find out 5 years from now that you're incompatible?
Yeah.
I find vulnerability with somebody is some of the most delicious experiences. You know, if I'm sharing something about me that's like, I think they're not going to like this, or they're not going to feel good, you know, I might hem and haw and, you know, and, but in my vulnerability, and if a person can receive my vulnerability in a way that's nurturing and kind and respectful, then it, you know, it's like it can be a turn on too. You know, it's just like instant
Oh,
connection.
it's incredible. I mean, and that's, I think, the incentive to keep going as well, is that you experience the difference between when you're reserving parts of yourself and you're not taking those steps forward into vulnerability, versus when you do that and you know, you say the scary thing, or you know, ask for your needs to be met, or whatever it is, you communicate boundary, you express an emotion that's vulnerable, and you're met in that place. The intimacy, that's what creates intimacy, and intimacy is delicious, you know. It's what makes relationships fulfilling. It's what gives you that bonding type of a feeling, releases all that oxytocin, you know, and it makes the relationship that much stronger, you know. And it's the same thing with when we experience rupture and repair in relationship, you know. It's like the bonding just gets, I mean, it just gets stronger if we're willing to stay through the discomfort and have those conversations and get real and get vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know?
And the flip side is, if somebody's not really good about what I'm being vulnerable about, then they're probably not going to be good later on. And, you know, I mean, not that people have to be perfect, but they got to have a willingness. But if they're not going to be good with my vulnerability, that probably means we're incompatible.
Right. Yes. And I do sort of feel like there's something to be said for, like I was sharing, kind of starting off small and building up, you know, building up trust over time that my vulnerability is safe with this person. Because I also used to be one of those people that I would just everything on the line, and just give everything and just so vulnerable. And even when I was the only one being vulnerable, and even when maybe this person didn't actually, I don't want to use the word deserve, but that, they weren't an appropriate person for me to share that level of vulnerability with, because they couldn't actually caretake it. We want to be with someone who treasures our vulnerability and can caretake that, who really, really can treat that as sacred and, just really, really cherish it and not, pour salt all over those open wounds that we're exposing.
Sure, sure. Well, let's see, at the risk of stepping over some of your question about compatibility and moving forward.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Because I don't, anybody who's stuck with us this long.
Goodness, time. Oh my gosh.
I
talk to you forever, Bill. That's my
I know. Yeah, same here. I'm a talker, Noelle used to say, "You're talking like a girl."
I like that. I like that, though. I like that, man.
Yeah, I've developed that ability to talk like a girl. But anybody who's stuck with us is probably very interested in the topic.
Yes.
So that's good. And those who haven't stuck with us, then that's fine too, But maybe the last thing we might cover, just based on time in general, but I'll go on too. But my biggest question is, how do we introduce the idea to people to have a conscious relationship, to have that be a priority, and to put some of these commitments into place? Because I just don't feel like I'm getting the message across to people. They're constantly getting in relationships, and they're like, they don't want that information then, because they're doing great, and then it all falls apart, and the next thing you know, they're posting that they're out of a relationship, and then and they go to the next relationship, and it's all great, and then they're posting about how it fell apart, later on, and it's like, how do you I don't know. It's a question I have. I don't know how to really communicate this in a way that people would actually take ownership of, like, I'm going to do a conscious relationship. I'm not just going to do what everybody else falls into doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's sort of connects to a larger question about just raising the consciousness of humanity as a whole, because I think if you're not conscious on an individual level, it's unlikely that you're going to be interested in a conscious relationship, because you're more in a reactive mode in life. You're more just kind of expecting things to come to you without, having to question and look at it and participate in new ways. So I would definitely say, like, reaching out to conscious communities, whatever that means or whatever that looks like, is probably going to be the best place to reach people. But unfortunately, I think a lot of people need to get into some pain before they're actually ready to say, like, this is how it needs to be, it has to be conscious for me. The other thing is that, for me personally, and this is just how I sort of like to present it, is I really like to share my personal story. I like to share my personal stories and just share from my own perspective and from my own heart about what it's been like for me and what some of the pain that I've gone through, because I know that people can relate to those stories when I share them about some of the past relationship struggles and just the awful situations I've been in, and also to to share with them what it's like now, and the partnership that I have now with Antoine, I think, is sort of like this example that I want to, I actually think that's part of why we're together, is that, we are, I mean, I can't tell you how many people who have spent time around us. Like, we just had some friends out here for Thanksgiving, Um, and just anyone who comes through, and just people who like meet us, who are closer to, usually closer to our age, that are like, I've literally never seen a healthy relationship in my life before. It's like, I didn't even know that this existed.
Yeah.
The way you guys talk to each other, like how you take care of each other, this dynamic that you have, the way you talk about things and go into things, like it's like we're providing a new example of a different paradigm, and people want that, and people ask questions about it. How did it get to be that way?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, and maybe if I had my own relationship that I was doing that, it might have a little more punch to my words. Uh,
see?
but even conscious people aren't, or people who are into being conscious in general and aware and growing, they're still
Oh
don't.
my God. And you know what, actually, Bill, like there's even a bigger, like, oh God, I'm just going to touch on this really briefly because I know we're like going to wrap up, but this thing in spiritual communities about like twin flames, and this whole cosmic thing where it's like, it's just this deep spiritual, like they're another part of my soul, and because of that it's just going to magically work out somehow.
Right,
It's
right.
like,
Good point.
no. Like, I have seen that again and again. People fall into these traps, and there's people actually unfortunately making money off of that, that are like selling this concept of twin flames, and kind of like, I don't know, creating this mentality of like, you don't necessarily have to do the work that everyone has to do,
Mm-hmm.
or that it should just be sort of this like fairy tale happy ending, or that you should be given some deep spiritual guidance to get through it that other people don't have, and it's just going to magically happen. Like, it doesn't magically happen, unfortunately.
No, it doesn't. That's a good point. One of the things that one of the books that I'm writing is entitled "Why Good Love Goes Bad."
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that.
How to be smart about falling in love and staying in love is the other part of the title. And one of the key things that I've introduced in that book is that when we're operating around a love relationship, we're operating from survival brain. I think survival brain is actually in charge most of the time.
Mm.
It's not our thinking brain. So survival brain is interested in what brings me survival. Oh, that feels good. Well, that must be for me. Oh, that feels uncomfortable. That must not be for me. So we get into a relationship because of all these good feelings. And then because obviously eventually conflict and difficult feelings are going to be arising, well, the survival brain goes, oh, but that's not fun. They won't like that. I don't like that. Let's do something else. Let's ignore that. So I think the survival brain directs us to not address difficult conversations.
Yes, yes, yes.
And that's one of the key reasons that people don't. Not only do they not know how, but we don't like feeling uncomfortable. I don't like conflict. If I didn't put these agreements in place, I would be trying to ignore the conflict. So I put these agreements in place for myself as much as anybody else. But that's one of the key reasons why people don't put it in place to address difficult feelings and conflicts, because it feels uncomfortable. We're operating on survival brain. Survival brain goes, oh, that's just too uncomfortable. Let's avoid that. Um, then,
Yeah.
then when it gets too uncomfortable, we address it with banging heads, and then the survival brain goes, this isn't much fun anymore. I'm going to go find another relationship. I'm going to drop this one.
Yeah, and that's kind of the pattern that you see until people sort of do it again and again anymore. Until they don't want to do it anymore. Until they can see the pattern, right? If that
Yeah.
happens.
And hopefully we're a voice that they have heard at some point where they go, I think I want to see what these guys are talking about, because whatever I'm doing is not working.
I hope so. I hope so too. I have so appreciated talking with you, Bill. Like I could just talk all afternoon and into the night with you about this stuff. I'm really looking forward to your book, When Good Love Goes Bad, and that's how to be smart about falling in love and staying in love.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a release date for that or no?
No, I've that's another conversation, but
Okay. Talk about that one another time, but
it's not coming out. It's not coming out real soon. But I have some things on my website that
yeah, where can people find you?
Best place is my website, thehealthycouple.com.
Thehealthycouple.com. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Thehealthycouple.com. And you guys can find me at juliaclairefriedman.com or on Facebook, Julia Claire Friedman. You can join my Facebook group, Julia's Inner Child Playground and Healing Community. And we do have lots of cool discussions about conscious relationships and other things. And I do hope to collaborate with you maybe again in the future, Bill, because it's just been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure for me too. I thank you for taking the time. I really honor the work you've done and you are doing right now. It's you're my vision. What you and Antoine are doing is my vision of our new world.
Oh, goodness. Thank you.
Yeah.
That feels really good to hear. I'm just taking that in. I appreciate that so much because, I really, again, I have so much respect for you, and just love it every time that you share. And just respect and admire you so much on a personal level and on a professional level. So it means a lot coming from you.
Thank you. Okay. We'll do it again. We'll do another.
Absolutely.